And our next speaker I'd like to introduce is Mark Buckland, who is an architect. He has a Bachelor of Science Architecture degree from the University of Cincinnati. And he was the project manager for Brooks plus Scarpa, who was responsible for the design of the shelter, the viewing platform, and the interpretive centre that you're going to see this afternoon. And Mark's going to talk about some of these design challenges that we've faced during this project. Mark.
What's the...
I'll do it.
Hello. As Susan mentioned, I've been a project manager at Brooks Scarpa, which when we started this project was formerly Pew plus Scarpa. I've been involved with this project since kind of the early to middle part of 2008. And have kind of, I'm going to give you a little kind of history of all the evolution of the design from when it kind of was what I know of it when it was in our office, even before my time involved in it, and just kind of through up to the present day of what's being in, what actually got built. We've all kind of seen this picture before, and I'm kind of showing it is that this is. Although the mural itself is the main impetus for why we did this project, and is not only an art piece, but is now revered as an artifact worthy of preservation and protection and everything else, and all the money that's being spent on doing this project. There's more to this whole area, as others have kind of mentioned, than just that artifact. There is the Susanoo Madre that Chris had mentioned that is, you can kind of see it as that's shown on the, you can kind of see its outline right there, and that's it was the original water source, domestic water source, sanitary water for the city of Los Angeles, and that what there's kind of shown there is that this is its path as it came through this area and onward. And it was actually the discovery of the Susanoo Madre, an intact portion of it inside the Hammer building that actually influenced this is kind of, that's the town hall, this portion of the building right here is the Hammer building, and it was in the basement, that actually influenced the design more than a lot of other things, than the mural itself, as well as the other artifact that gets kind of talked about, but is the fabric of the buildings themselves, the old brickwork, the archways, all that stuff is, in the big picture, is an artifact as too that is competing for its own identity, and all of these things, all these competing things. And as it's mentioned, is that there was a collaboration of all the different entities and given prioritizing what took precedence over another thing. Not that it got disregarded, but you had to kind of order it as that this is what how we're gonna deal with each one of these things. The mural, it was whitewashed and it went unprotected, and then in the 1970s, as it was been mentioned, is that the whitewashing started fading and it became sort of rediscovered, is that the mural started showing through. And there was those efforts to let's do something about it, but until they could figure out just what they wanted to do, a protective shelter was basically built around it that basically hid it from view again, but just to stop the further degradation of the mural surface itself. And this was, the first one was done in 1982, and it was just a plywood, sheet metal kind of structure that you can kind of see on the top photos there, just done to protect it. And then in 2002, the Getty kind of took that down and they put something a little more protective, or something that could be dismantled a little easier, so that they could get into it and find out and kind of do their preliminary investigation of it. But why I'm showing this is that in 1996, a project was that they did some seismic retrofit of the whole area that we refer to as the Division 88, which is a division in the building code that just kind of brings all these buildings up to minimal seismic standards. And as part of that retrofit for the area, they actually installed some columns that they had been planning on erecting a future mural shelter. Though they didn't really have the whole thing designed, it wasn't really funded, but the columns got erected, and you know, these things, we of course removed those, but they had what we were tasked with doing back in the early 1990s when we were brought on board by the city in collaboration with another architecture firm, and as well as with Tom Hartman, is to basically evolve these columns, or make something real, is to move the process along. And back then, what the project comprised of was, and it's still comprised of these major elements, though stripped down, is a shelter that goes over top of it that would protect it from environmental damage, a viewing platform, and an interpretive center. So back in 2002, this mural shelter was kind of a traditional 4-column structure, had some side sunshades on it. It kind of had a hip roof construction, metal panels on top of it. The viewing platform was actually on top of the Hamel building, a much larger thing. Because of the size of the viewing platform, we needed an egress stair that cut down through the restaurant. This is the Pelanconi building, which is the La Golondrina restaurant, but it cut down through as part of their space. You accessed that viewing platform from the Gibbs building, and a stair that was in there, up through there and across a long, probably about a 60-foot bridge, and to the viewing platform, and you were approximately about 45 feet away from the mural surface itself. And these are just kind of a couple renderings from that 2002 scheme. This 2002 scheme was actually even permitted by the city. It was all ready to be built, and shortly after it got its ready to permit issue, the Susanoo Madre was discovered while we were taking some soil borings in the actual quarry, this intact section, that impacted, or that discovery of this thing kind of, so it was one of the influences of why it was kind of put on hold. It's kind of like, what are we going to do with this thing? Is because this current design and all the structure, whoops, I don't think anyone was mean to do that. These columns were coming down right on top of this thing. And initially the thinking was that we would cut out a section, much like the initial thinking of the mural is, let's remove it, put it somewhere else. And when they started doing what is called a CEQA, which is the California Environmental Quality Act, is an investigation as to how to mitigate this thing, our initial thinking of, let's remove the intact, and this was it's like a 4.5-foot diameter brick pipe, basically, that carried the water. Remove that section of it, go display it somewhere else, and then we'll build our mural shelter in its place. But they determined that no, that wasn't going to happen. That pipe needed to stay exactly where it was, which is fine. But resolving how we were going to resolve all these forces was one of the things that influenced the design that I'll kind of go into. But I wanted to, before I get into the current scheme, I wanted to kind of paint a picture of what the area in itself is to everything that's down here, the 5 buildings that comprise this project limits, essentially, is that disregarding what's being shown here as the current thing and looking more just at the fabric of the buildings themselves. You had the town hall that anchors the block on both sides from all the way to Cesar Chavez Street. It was originally built in 1908 by Marie Hamill, who was the owner of the adjoining building, which was built the following year in kind of 2 stages. The western half, western 2/3 of it was constructed in 1909, and then the eastern half on Olvera Street was added, the last third added in 1913. Adjacent to the kind of that building and kind of in the middle is one of the older buildings on the thing, and this was another building that was built in 2 different time periods, actually multiple time periods. But the restaurant part of it, which it was a restaurant, it's been a restaurant since 1930, 1857 on the eastern portion of it, and then in 1910, the warehouse portion of it on Main Street was built. Next to that is the Gibbs building, which is the youngest of the buildings in here. This building has had over the years, it was built in 1926, but it has been extensively remodeled over the years with, let's say, 1932. It got a lot of ornamentation. It got a cement plaster coating on the brick surface. It got the clay tile across the top there. They had there was some ornamentation, some metal things on top of the windows. In 1947, a building that I'll kind of show a little bit later that we referred to as the glassblower shop was installed it was right in the it sat right in here. That was in 1947, and then and more recently in 1990, the actual elevator and the stair access was actually put in, and that was put in not so much just for the Gibbs building, but it was put in for the egress for the Sepulveda building to get onto this stuff. And the Sepulveda house itself was in 1887. And it's been a commercial space. It had on the front here, it was the owner's residence, and then the commercial spaces below, and then on the upper floor, it was rooming, for rent rooms. So, moving forward in time as the project languished, and in part, as I mentioned, the Susanoo Madre, as well as Chris has mentioned, there was some cost ramifications of what we were doing, some merchants' objections to, because the footprint of the stuff was coming into their space. You had then the general politics of the thing, but that design that I'd shown previously kind of languished and just kind of held up. And then in 2007, we were again approached to let's reduce the scope to mitigate some of the impacts that we would have to the different merchants, as well as the cost of it. And we basically gave them a couple concept renderings to show a reduced scale thing. Of course, we went with that's how the fabric kind of cavity is, to reduce the weight, because we knew at some point all that load's coming down and we're going to have to get over top of the Susanoo Madre. So we wanted to lighten our load that we would eventually have to transfer. But the same similar elements were part of it. You had a shelter kind of protecting from the sun. You had some sunshades on the sides. The bridge was removed, and the viewing platform became very scaled down to just coming out the same with the original path, and it had a little canopy over top of it, and then using the Sepulveda building as our emergency egress point. And it's been mentioned multiple times, is that this effort was a collective kind of design effort, but there were some main kind of architectural project goals that we were trying to accomplish with everything that we were going to be doing. And while the American Tropical artifact was the prime one, there were some other things that kind of going on here, and you know, the environmental protection was, you know, it wasn't just sun, it was some rain, it was even vandalism, and they wanted to have this public viewing that, you know, at certain times we have night viewing of it, creating the exhibit space for the symbolism of what the mural was about, as well as Siqueiros' impact to today's artists and the techniques that they use, as well as, you know, preserving the fabric of the existing buildings, as I showed. And also importantly was the isolation of our structure from imposing any loads on the existing unreinforced masonry buildings, which don't like sideway things, don't like earthquakes. And so this load, our structure was just meant to move on its own. It has, you know, there's seismic joints in around all the columns that allow about 3-inch movement. As part of kind of figuring out just what we wanted with the profile of that mural to be, we kind of went through a lot of sun studies and of trying to figure out, because at some point you just can't, the size of the shelter to block all sun would be impossible. It would get so large with low sun and stuff like that. So we kind of had to have find that middle ground as to what we could put up with. So studies were done, kind of showing the Susanoo Madre in there. But initially, our designs were basically a single column that came down in kind of an H configuration to 2 columns that were below the roof, and then eventually transfer to get over the Susanoo Madre that's just kind of shown in, that's where it's passing through. You see from the earlier scheme, you're much further away from the mural as far as the view and everything of it, but it's kind of showing just what was kind of going into how this shape eventually came to be. This is kind of showing the space frame itself, the thing that's covered, the mural shelter. It's covered with, but it's a 2-way truss essentially, with these large, about 7-inch diameter pipes that are all interworked in, and it kind of looks like an erector set up there, all coming to the loads coming down to this column that then it would basically be lowered on top of these columns that went straight down to the ground. But this is kind of showing in the basement, and that picture that Chris had shown of the wishbone kind of transfer beam. So you have the location of the Susanoo Madre that is right there. So that single column is coming down, and then it transfers over to this wishbone transfer beam that is then welded to what we call a pile cap. It's a big, thick 5-foot thick pile cap that has another like 45-foot long piles that basically hold it all in place. So that is the wishbone transfer beam. And of course the other one, which is a much simpler kind of load in that we didn't have to transfer anything, but it's a similar that you got a big pile cap and the column itself is bolted to a T configuration of columns just to spread the load on how it's dispersing to to the soil itself. Up on the roof, this is just kind of giving you a plan kind of configuration of some of the different features that you've got. We're now 125 feet away from the viewing platform and the mural surface itself. We have the two single columns. They have the seismic dripping around of them. Cantilevered off those columns themselves are a couple beams that support the sunshades that are kind of perforated copper that wrap those things to prevent the side light coming in. There's a three-part protective screen that rolls down, so when the mural is not being viewed, that mural is coming down, and that helps mitigate the sun, on low winter sun coming in, is that it's when it's not being exposed to the actual sun and rain and everything when it's not being viewed. Additionally, you've got you can kind of see the outline of the end up what the mural shelter itself is, and then there's a light bar that we installed approximately 18, 19 feet away from that is for both lighting up the mural itself during the night as well as the canopy, because you can kind of see the canopy from around the city, and just kind of it's more to attempt to become an icon. Here's a couple renderings that we had done that just kind of show, what we envisioned. You can kind of see the space frame coming through the fabric-covered mural itself. You got a town hall, these sunshades and everything, and this is from the other side, very similar. This is kind of showing the sunshades themselves. We actually ended up putting copper on both sides of but one of the features that doesn't show up real closely when you're down there, you can see, but is this band that you can kind of see here, this discolor, is actually, it's now a solid band, but it's meant to accentuate a feature on the town hall it's on each side of the building, but it's not exactly the same. It's not in the same location, but each one of the sides, this copper band is different width and height, and basically it's kind of trying to mesh not only with the patina color of the copper itself with the golden color of the brick, but some of the architectural features of that. This is kind of just a rendering to kind of give you an overview of what's kind of going on, and the main elements that we were dealing with, the shelter, the viewing platform, and the buildings in between, as well as there was a plaza that we created off of Olivera Street, and then inside on the ground floor in this portion is the interpretive center itself. This is the viewing platform, and it's only maybe a couple hundred square feet. We had to limit its size because of the fire department to keep it less than 20 people up there at one time, because they were just because we are using the egress. We're using the Sepulveda building to egress people off instead of having that large stair that came down through. Back in 2002, that came down through the restaurant. But this is just pretty much, you have a couple benches in here underneath a perforated copper canopy over top of it, guardrail. There's some lighting in here. It's got a T-bar grating aluminum flooring so that any water that doesn't come through, it runs through the grating down to the roof of this building and connected to the street stormwater system. A rendering of that, looking back at it, you see there's perforated copper on the side that has an image of a self-portrait of Siqueiros himself that you can kind of see here, and the name of the center. That just kind of gives you an overview of what we were trying to kind of just frame the view from the people, and give them an area where they could sit there for 10, 15, half hour, and they were out of the sun This is looking back towards the mural itself, kind of showing just the guardrails and the overhead canopy and everything. As we were going through design, shortly after we had got some schematic design approval, the city decided that they wanted to kind of open up the entryway off of Olvera Street by removing the glassblower shop that sat in here and creating a kind of a plaza that would also allow the egress corridor, a little more width to the egress corridor that they wanted to create, and a much better pass-through. But so that glassblower shop that was a non-contributing structure was removed right at the beginning of construction, and it actually exposed, hidden from view, because there was a metal wood stud wall in front of this thing that hid all these existing openings. This is the Pelanconi restaurant right here, but the plaza and Gibbs building, these arch openings that fortunately we didn't have to change design too much. We kind of raised the sill on the door that was coming. There's a ramp in here that I'll show, but this was actually, it was one of those pleasant surprises that we came across. The plaza itself kind of takes you from Olvera Street. There's a ramp, a handicap ramp along one side, wide set of stairs, a raised portion up here, kind of a brick planter along one side with some plantings, I think aloe and lamandra. The site wall itself is kind of an adze, which is kind of a scallop kind of wood treatment or finish, Alaskan yellow cedar, as well as at the door and door surround, some yellow brick, the reclaimed or salvaged brick pavers from Olvera Street, the portion that we had to remove to do the construction, and a couple granite millstones. But this really opened up by removal of the glassblower shop that you saw there. This really created a much nicer entry space into the space as a whole. There's a rendering of that plaza that, while not exactly true to what was actually built, it gives you the sense. The building said this, that we had to create an egress corridor for getting people off of Olvera Street. And we did that. It actually was able to, by doing that pass-through corridor, was able to create a lobby space for the interpretive center itself. And really all we've done with the interpretive center is we created kind of a white box with a nice wood floor, white box for the actual exhibit, to what Tom Hartman will go into about what's all that's going on. But we just kind of created some public space with the different flooring materials, a patron restroom, and it's a pass-through corridor. And you can, this is the main street that has the same self-portrait of Siqueiros himself and signage on top of the main street entry into that Gibbs building. And that's it.